In a world where trust can be a fragile illusion and greed can drive people to unthinkable lengths, a seemingly ordinary street boy becomes the unlikeliest hero. This is the story of bravery, betrayal, and redemption, a tale of how one courageous act can turn the tide of fate. Title: Homeless Boy Saves Business Tycoon. Your life is in danger. What happens next will leave you speechless. Subscribe to the Story Atelier for free and never miss our newest videos, delivered fresh to you every day. Join us for inspiring, thrilling, and heartfelt stories that captivate and entertain. Hit that subscribe button now. The sun was setting over the hills of San Francisco, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The sprawling mansion of Jacob Westbrook sat at the top of the hill, a masterpiece of modern architecture. The enormous glass windows shimmered like a beacon, showcasing the wealth and success of its owner. Inside, Jacob, a sharp and methodical man in his late 40s, was immersed in paperwork, planning his next business acquisition. Jacob Westbrook had built his empire from the ground up, a man of integrity and hard work. He prided himself on creating opportunities not just for himself but for others. However, success had its cost: long hours, constant travel, and a life that often felt more like a boardroom than a home. Victoria, Jacob's wife of 12 years, watched him from the doorway of his study. She was a picture of elegance, her diamond necklace catching the fading sunlight. To an outsider, they were the perfect couple, a power duo built on mutual respect and shared goals. But within her heart, resentment had taken root. The glitz and glamour of their life together couldn't mask her growing discontent. "Dinner at the club tonight?" Jacob asked absent-mindedly, not looking up from his papers. Victoria hesitated for a moment, smoothing the hem of her silk dress. "I can't, Jacob. The charity board meeting is tonight. Remember?" Her voice was soft, but the subtle edge of detachment lingered. Jacob nodded distractedly. "Of course. Give them my regards." As Victoria left the room, her calm demeanor gave way to something darker. She glanced at her phone, texting a single word to an unknown number: "On my way." She arrived at a secluded parking lot in the shadow of the city, the air thick with the scent of damp asphalt. There, leaning against a weathered car, stood Caleb Westbrook, Jacob's estranged younger brother. Caleb was the antithesis of Jacob, a man who had squandered opportunities and nursed a bitterness that had festered over the years. "You're late," Caleb said curtly as Victoria approached. "I had to make sure Jacob wouldn't suspect anything," she replied, slipping an envelope into his hand. "It's all here. The details for tomorrow." Caleb opened the envelope, glancing over the meticulous notes. "The coastal highway, smart, no cameras, no traffic, and no witnesses," Victoria added, her voice steady. "Cold. His meeting tomorrow is early. He'll be on the road before dawn." "What about the brakes?" Caleb asked, his grin sharp and predatory. "Already taken care of," Victoria said confidently. "It'll look like an accident." As they continued to finalize their sinister plan, neither of them noticed the small, wiry figure hiding behind a nearby dumpster. Lucas, an 11-year-old boy who had been surviving on the streets for the past year, had been looking for shelter when he stumbled upon their meeting. Lucas froze, his ears straining to catch every word. The mention of tampering with brakes, the casual talk of causing a fatal accident, it sent a chill down his spine. He didn't know who they were planning to harm, but he knew he couldn't stand by and let it happen. When Victoria and Caleb finally parted ways, Lucas cautiously crept from his hiding spot. He had no home, no family, and no one to turn to. But his conscience wouldn't allow him to walk away. Whoever this Jacob is. He needs to know, Lucas muttered under his breath. With determination outweighing his fear, Lucas began his quest to warn Jacob Westbrook. But the mansion on the hill was a world away from the streets Lucas knew. The night deepened as Lucas made his way to the wealthier part of the city. He'd heard of Jacob Westbrook before, a name that echoed in news reports and charity drives. Westbrook Industries was known for its community initiatives, and Jacob himself was often credited with funding homeless shelters and educational programs for underprivileged kids. As Lucas wandered through the unfamiliar streets, doubt began to creep in. How could he, a ragged street kid, possibly convince someone like Jacob that his life was in danger? By the time he reached the gated community where Jacob lived, the towering mansions and manicured lawns seemed like an impenetrable fortress. The imposing iron gates of the Westbrook estate loomed before him. Lucas hesitated, glancing nervously at the security cameras. "Here goes nothing," he murmured, steeling himself. He pressed the intercom button, his hands trembling. A crisp voice crackled through the speaker. "Westbrook residence. State your business. I need to see Mr. Westbrook," Lucas said, his voice shaky but resolute. "It's about his safety. It's urgent." There was a pause before the voice replied. "Mr. Westbrook doesn't take unscheduled visitors. Please leave." "No, you don't understand," Lucas pleaded. "Someone's trying to hurt him. It's his wife and his brother." Inside the mansion, Jacob overheard the commotion through the intercom system. His brow furrowed as he listened to the young, desperate voice. Something about the boy's tone caught his attention, an urgency that couldn't be ignored. "Let him in," Jacob said finally, surprising the security team. Lucas was ushered into the mansion, his dirty clothes and unkempt hair a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Jacob entered the room, his expression guarded but curious. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. "Lucas," the boy replied, clutching his tattered hoodie. "Mr. Westbrook, I overheard something tonight. Your wife and someone named Caleb are planning to hurt you. They talked about tampering with your car, your brakes. They want it to look like an accident." Jacob's initial reaction was disbelief. He studied the boy, his eyes narrowing. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling the truth." Lucas insisted, his voice breaking. "They were in a parking lot downtown. I heard them planning everything." For a moment, silence filled the room. Jacob's mind raced. Victoria, Caleb, it seemed impossible, yet Lucas's sincerity was hard to ignore. Finally, Jacob exhaled sharply. "If what you're saying is true, you've done me a great service, Lucas. But I need proof." "I don't have proof," Lucas admitted. "But please, just check your car before you leave tomorrow. You'll see I'm not lying." Jacob nodded slowly, his instincts telling him to take the boy's warning seriously. He called his personal mechanic, instructing him to inspect the car immediately. Lucas waited anxiously, his heart pounding. Minutes later, the mechanic returned, his face pale. "The brakes have been tampered with, sir. If you'd driven this car." He trailed off, shaking his head. Jacob's blood ran cold. The betrayal hit him like a freight train. He stared at the boy, his expression softening. "You saved my life, Lucas," he said quietly. But Jacob also knew this was just the beginning. Whoever Lucas was, whatever his reasons for stepping forward, they now shared a dangerous secret. And Jacob Westbrook was not a man who took betrayal lightly. The morning sun had barely risen when Jacob Westbrook stood in his private garage, staring at the car that should have been his death sentence. The knowledge that Victoria and Caleb had conspired against him filled him with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and pain. The people he had trusted most, his wife and brother, had betrayed him in the cruelest way imaginable. Lucas stood quietly to the side, shifting nervously on his feet. Despite his young age, the weight of the situation wasn't lost on him. He had risked everything to warn Jacob. But now he felt the immense gravity of what lay ahead. Jacob turned to Lucas, his expression a mixture of gratitude and resolve. "You've done more for me than I can ever repay," Jacob said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "But this isn't over. If they're willing to go this far, they won't stop until they think they've won." "What are you going to do?" Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to give them exactly what they want," Jacob replied, his eyes hardening. Jacob spent the day crafting a plan with military precision. He had a network of trusted allies, including his longtime personal attorney, Mr. Henderson, and a private security team who had served him loyally for years. He shared everything he'd learned with them, laying out the steps to expose Victoria and Caleb while ensuring his safety. The first step was creating the illusion of Jacob's demise. If Victoria and Caleb thought their plan had succeeded, they would let their guard down, making it easier to gather evidence of their guilt. Jacob called Victoria that afternoon, keeping his tone casual and warm. "I've decided to take a few days off," he told her. "I'll be heading up the coast to our beach house. Just me and the open road. I need some time to think." Victoria responded with practiced concern. "Of course, darling. You've been working so hard lately. Take all the time you need." The subtle satisfaction in her voice didn't escape Jacob. Meanwhile, Lucas was brought into the fold. Despite his young age, his resourcefulness and courage had already proven invaluable. Jacob explained the plan to him, watching as the boy listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "So, you're going to fake the accident?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with both awe and concern. "Exactly," Jacob confirmed, "but it has to look real. Victoria and Caleb need to believe I'm gone. Only then will we have the proof we need to take them down." Lucas nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I'll do whatever it takes to help." The following morning, Jacob set the plan into motion. He drove the sabotaged car to a secluded stretch of coastal highway, with Lucas following discreetly in another vehicle driven by Jacob's security detail. Along the way, Jacob reflected on the life he had built, the sacrifices he had made, and the betrayal that now threatened to destroy it all. At the designated spot, Jacob pulled over. His security team quickly disabled the vehicle's tracking system and rigged it with controlled explosives designed to simulate a fiery crash. Jacob and Lucas stood at a safe distance as the car erupted into flames. The heat of the blaze a stark reminder of how close he had come to death. "It's done," Jacob said grimly, watching the flames consume the car. News of the accident spread quickly. By the afternoon, the media was flooded with reports of Jacob Westbrook's tragic death. Photographs of the burnt car dominated the headlines, and speculation about the future of Westbrook Industries began almost immediately. At the mansion, Victoria put on a convincing display of grief, accepting condolences from friends and business associates. But behind closed doors, her mask slipped. She met Caleb in the living room, her expression triumphant. "It's over," Victoria said, pouring herself a glass of wine. "The car was found this morning. They're calling it a tragic accident." Caleb smirked, leaning back on the leather couch. "And now, we wait for the inheritance. Just a little longer, and everything he built will be ours." They toasted to their supposed victory. completely unaware that Jacob was alive and watching them through hidden surveillance cameras. For the next few days, Jacob and Lucas worked tirelessly to gather evidence. With the help of his attorney and security team, Jacob had installed hidden microphones and cameras throughout the mansion weeks earlier. He had long suspected Victoria's growing distance, though he had never imagined her betrayal would run so deep. The recordings captured everything: Victoria and Caleb's discussions about accessing the inheritance, their laughter over Jacob's supposed demise, and even their initial plotting in the parking lot. Lucas, who had grown more confident in his role, provided valuable insights. His street smarts allowed him to anticipate the couple's moves, helping Jacob stay one step ahead. "Do you think they'll try to move quickly with the will?" Lucas asked one evening, sitting across from Jacob in the beach house where they were hiding out. "Without a doubt," Jacob replied. "They won't want to risk any delays. That's why we need to strike before they can make their move." As expected, Victoria and Caleb visited Jacob's attorney, Mr. Henderson, under the guise of settling the estate. Victoria played the role of the grieving widow perfectly, her tearful performance convincing everyone in the room, except Henderson, who was in on the plan. "I understand this is a difficult time, Mrs. Westbrook," Henderson said sympathetically, "but there's a clause in Jacob's will that we need to discuss." Victoria and Caleb exchanged a quick, nervous glance. "What kind of clause?" Victoria asked, her tone laced with feigned curiosity. Henderson cleared his throat, pulling out the document. "It states that if Jacob's death is deemed suspicious in any way, his assets will be placed in a trust and cannot be accessed by his spouse or next of kin until a thorough investigation is completed." Victoria's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowing. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice tight. "Jacob would never have added something like that. It was added just weeks ago." Henderson replied smoothly, "I have his signature here to prove it." Caleb leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "This investigation, how long will it take?" "As long as it needs to," Henderson said firmly. Victoria and Caleb left the office in a simmering rage. Jacob, watching the live feed from the beach house, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "They're cornered," Lucas said, sitting beside him. "What happens next?" Jacob turned to the boy, his expression serious. "Now, we finish this." The tension inside Victoria's mind was almost palpable as she and Caleb returned to the mansion. The clause in Jacob's will was an unforeseen hurdle, and her carefully laid plans now seemed precariously close to unraveling. Caleb, visibly agitated, poured himself a drink, his movements sharp and jerky. "This wasn't part of the plan," he muttered, pacing the room. "That lawyer, he's stalling. You think he suspects something?" Victoria clenched her jaw, her mind racing. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that we stick to the story. As long as no one finds out the truth, we'll still get everything. We just need to be patient." Despite her words, a seed of doubt began to sprout in her mind. Something felt off. Meanwhile, at the secluded beach house, Jacob Westbrook was putting the final touches on his plan. With Lucas by his side, he reviewed the mountain of evidence they had collected: audio recordings, video footage, and detailed notes from Victoria and Caleb's meetings. "You've done more than I could have ever expected, Lucas," Jacob said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "Because of you, we'll finally expose the truth." Lucas, now far more confident than the timid boy who first approached Jacob, nodded resolutely. "They need to pay for what they've done, for what they tried to do to you. Trust me, they will," Jacob assured him. 2 days later, Victoria received an unexpected call from Mr. Henderson. "We've completed the preliminary review of Jacob's estate," the lawyer explained. "I'd like you and Mr. Caleb Westbrook to come to the office tomorrow to finalize the details." Victoria couldn't help but feel a rush of triumph. "Of course, we'll be there." That evening, she and Caleb celebrated their impending success. The weight of suspicion began to lift, replaced by the smug confidence that their scheme was back on track. But neither of them could have predicted the storm awaiting them. The next morning, Victoria and Caleb arrived at Henderson's office, their demeanor cool and collected. Victoria wore a somber black dress, her expression carefully composed. Caleb, as usual, hovered in the background, exuding a quiet menace. Henderson greeted them with his usual professionalism, gesturing for them to take a seat. On his desk was a thick folder labeled with Jacob's name. "As you know," Henderson began, "Jacob's estate is substantial. However, due to the clause in his will, certain protocols must be followed before any assets can be released." Victoria nodded, maintaining her air of patience. "We understand, Mr. Henderson. Please proceed." Henderson opened the folder, flipping through several pages. "Before we continue, I'd like to show you something. This was recently brought to my attention." He turned a screen toward them and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of a recording, Victoria and Caleb's voices. Unmistakable and chilling. "Victoria, the break's already taken care of. He'll never see it coming." "Caleb, good. The coastal highway is perfect. No witnesses. No cameras." Victoria's face went pale, her carefully crafted mask beginning to crack. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. Henderson didn't flinch. "It's evidence, Mrs. Westbrook. Evidence of your involvement in a conspiracy to murder your husband." Before Victoria could respond, the door to the office opened. Jacob Westbrook stepped inside, alive and well. Victoria gasped, her eyes wide with shock. Caleb froze, his drink still in hand, as if seeing a ghost. "Surprised to see me?" Jacob asked coldly, his piercing gaze fixed on them. How are you here?" Victoria stammered, her voice trembling. "The accident was staged," Jacob interrupted, his voice sharp. "Thanks to Lucas. I discovered your plan before it was too late." Victoria's shock quickly turned to fury. This is a setup. You have no proof." "Don't I?" Jacob replied, gesturing to the screen. Another video began to play, showing footage of Victoria and Caleb's secret meetings, their whispered conversations filled with incriminating details. Caleb stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything." At that moment, the door opened again, and 2 police officers stepped inside. "Actually, we can," one of them said, holding up an arrest warrant. The officers moved quickly, handcuffing Caleb first as he struggled and cursed. Victoria, realizing the gravity of the situation, collapsed into her chair, her head in her hands. "Jacob, please," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I only did it because you ignored me. I felt invisible. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted a way out." Jacob's expression remained cold, unmoved by her words. "You didn't want a way out. You wanted everything, and you were willing to kill me to get it." Victoria's sobs filled the room as the officers escorted her and Caleb away. As silence settled over the office, Jacob turned to Lucas, who had been standing in the corner, watching everything unfold. The boy's eyes were wide, a mixture of shock and satisfaction on his face. "You did it, Lucas," Jacob said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because of you, justice was served." Lucas looked up at Jacob, his voice trembling. "I just did what was right. And that makes you braver than most people I've ever met," Jacob replied with a rare smile. In the weeks that followed, Jacob worked to rebuild his life, starting with the people he allowed into it. Lucas, who had once been an invisible street boy, became a central part of Jacob's world. Jacob adopted Lucas formally, ensuring that the boy who had saved his life would never want for anything again. Lucas, in turn, became not just a part of Jacob's family but also his most trusted confidant. The mansion that had once been filled with deceit and greed now echoed with laughter and hope. For Jacob and Lucas, their unlikely partnership marked the beginning of a brighter, more meaningful future. And for Victoria and Caleb, their fall from grace was a harsh reminder that greed and betrayal always come at a cost. Jacob Westbrook's story is more than a tale of betrayal and redemption. It's a testament to the power of courage and integrity. In the face of unimaginable treachery, a young boy with nothing to his name stood up for what was right, saving a man's life and uncovering a truth that could have remained buried. Lucas's bravery reminds us that even in the darkest moments, acts of kindness and courage can create ripples that change lives. Jacob, in turn, showed us that trust, though fragile, can be rebuilt with time. And that family is not always defined by blood but by the bonds we choose to nurture. Victoria and Caleb's downfall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and betrayal. No amount of wealth or ambition is worth sacrificing the trust and love of those around us. Their choices left them with nothing but regret, proving that dishonesty will always come with a price. In a time when trust can feel scarce and the pursuit of personal gain often overshadows relationships, let this story remind us of a few timeless truths. Kindness and courage matter, just as Lucas risked everything to do what was right. We too can make a difference by standing up against wrongs, no matter how small our actions may seem. Greed leads to isolation. The pursuit of wealth and power at the expense of others ultimately leaves us empty. True fulfillment comes from relationships built on honesty and respect. Family is who we choose to stand by, like Jacob and Lucas. The strongest bonds are forged not through obligation but through mutual loyalty and love. Integrity prevails, even when deception seems to win in the short term. The truth will always surface. Living a life of integrity is the only way to build lasting success and peace of mind. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, we invite you to become a part of our growing community. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated on the most captivating stories. Each crafted to entertain, inspire, and provoke thought. Your support is what keeps this channel alive, bringing you the most compelling tales for free. By subscribing, you won't miss a single episode and will help us continue sharing stories that resonate across cultures and generations. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next story. Subscribe now to join the journey. Together, let's explore tales that speak to the heart and inspire the soul.